First, then Steve opening, and then we'll get to the questions. Okay, so opening first. First, thank you very much. This is my 10th time coming before you to ask you for your support for my election. I don't see this as a campaign where I am running against Mr. Smith. I'm running to have the privilege to cast your vote, because 650,000 people from this 31st Congressional District in the city of Los Angeles cannot be in Washington, D.C. But each and every one of us has a stake in whether a young man or woman who's a son or a daughter, brother, sister, grandson, granddaughter will be in Afghanistan and Iraq. Each and every one of us has a stake on whether or not we'll have access to decent, affordable health care. Each and every one of us has a stake on whether or not we're going to be able to say that our kids will get as good a job as we hope that we will have secured for ourselves. And so someone gets to do that. 435 of us have that privilege. This is my 10th time asking you for that privilege to be your vote. I am not running against Stephen Smith. I am running for the privilege once again to be your vote. And I hope that I have proven over these last 18 years that I've earned that privilege to serve you. Whether it's because the woman who lives in Hollywood, who lives solely on Social Security on less than $1,000 a month, who came to our offices because, lo and behold, Social Security discovered that they had been overpaying her for quite some time, and she owed back a substantial amount of her income. And she lived in a one-room apartment in Hollywood, would be able to pay now $100 a month back to the Social Security system. And because my office, and I won't take full credit for that because it's really my congressional staff that made it possible for her to then be able to make $15 payments a month. Or whether it's because I feel proud that in 2002 I voted against giving George Bush the authority to go to war in Iraq in a misguided military intervention. Or whether it's because I voted to pass historic healthcare legislation, which today gives you a right to tell your 24-year-old child that he or she can stay on your health insurance, even if graduating from college that person can't find a job. Or whether it's now having 9 consecutive months of private sector growth in this country, 870,000 jobs, compared to during the entire George Bush administration when in the private sector we lost jobs. And so that in the last 9 months we have created more jobs in 2010 than during the entire 8 years of the Bush administration in the private sector. I feel very proud of what I've done. I'll stand before you and defend it. And I hope it's not just a matter of defending it, but I'll promote those kinds of policies if you give me a chance to once again have the privilege to be your vote in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. What an adventure. As I come before you, I was reflecting what we've been going through over the last 2 years. And I've come to one conclusion, and it's gratitude. It's gratitude. When we began, we did not know where to start. As many of you know who live in this district, there has been no infrastructure, if you will, for the Republican Party. There's been no clubs, etc. So my wife and I ventured out into the community, unsure of what to do, without financial backing, and we just began knocking on doors and talking to people. And as we did it, we got into virtually every community in this wonderful district and experienced fully its diversity. And there I discovered why I'm doing it. I'm here because of the new Americans, the new immigrants who have come to this country from countries that have been overrun by socialism and communism, and they told me that as they looked out and see the kind of directions and the things that are happening in our country today, that they see the same thing happening and they're afraid. And ladies and gentlemen, that is why I'm here. I am here because I was afraid. And I've actually told the congressman at town halls that I was afraid. And I'm simply looking for an opportunity to be of service, to see that those of us who are unable to take care of themselves are helped. But I also want to unleash the American spirit of liberty and for us to be able to go out and build our own lives and be independent. Thank you very much.
So I believe the first question we were asked to respond to, Jim, was what's at stake in this election? Jobs, our kids' education, and our security. And I don't mean just our national security. I mean our neighborhood security. Because too often, the terrorism that we face isn't that which is coming from abroad. It's the terrorism we face at night trying to walk through our streets where we don't know if a random bullet may hit us because our streets just aren't safe. And so, to me, what's at stake in this election is putting in front of you the leaders who will vote to ensure that there are good quality, long-term jobs that you and I can look forward to. But more importantly for me, for my 3 daughters, that will be the case when they are ready to reach the workforce. That we will have done everything possible to educate them so we don't have to have what we call the H-1B visa program, which is a program to import high-paid workers into this country because companies in America can't find people who are technically skilled to take these $90,000 paying jobs in America. And so jobs, 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 education for our kids, and safety, security for our people. Because if you can't feel safe, whether you're a neighbor or whether you're a business, you're not going to feel real comfortable about your country. So what do? Well, I believe we had to get out of this rut. We were in a free fall. As I mentioned before, for 22 consecutive months, we have lost jobs under President Bush. When Barack Obama was handed the keys by George Bush to the White House, that month in January 2009, we lost 780,000 jobs in America. That's 25,000 Americans who were hemorrhaging their work, their jobs, their livelihood every day in January 2009. Now, that's been reversed. As I said, 9 consecutive months of job growth in the private sector. Not government jobs, private sector jobs. But it's a far cry when you lose 8 million jobs in this Bush recession. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a long road. So the recovery won't be overnight. But we put in place the elements that will help us. Since this Recovery Act was passed last year by this Congress with the President's help, that we have reversed that trend. Remember, in this recession, we lost $17 trillion of wealth. 17 trillion is a lot of money. How much? Every man, woman, and child in this country, including the newborn, $55,000 in wealth stripped from us. Each and every one of the 307 million Americans. 55,000 gone, disappeared. If you didn't have 55,000, and if you have a family of 4, that's over 200,000. If you're saying, I didn't lose $200,000, well, guess what? That means someone else had to lose more than 200,000 for it to be on average 55,000 for every man, woman, and child. Guess what? A third of that lost wealth has now been recovered because your 401k isn't as bad. Some of you are now working again. Some of you were able to hold your home. And as a result, a third of that lost wealth has now been recovered since the Recovery Act. We need to move. And I intend to continue to move to create those jobs, to get this economy back on track, and to make sure that our kids have a decent place to go to school so that at the end of the day, you feel safe, you feel secure, not just because we're going to take care of the terrorism abroad, but we're going to take care of the terrorism domestically here in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. He's right. The question is how do we best go about it? I know people here have been active in the anti-gang efforts right here in our own community and have gone to Congressman Becerra's office and sought help through the federal RICO acts, and it was not offered. There are already tools in place for our federal government to come in and address our gang problems, and it just hasn't happened. And it's very important that we move in those directions. In terms of education, Absolutely. Absolutely. I do not have any objection at all. But how do we get our economy going? And our economy has limitations in terms of what the government can do and in terms of what the choices that have been made. If you look at the model that our president has followed to deal with this recession, is if they followed the Franklin Delano Roosevelt model, which absolutely failed to turn things around until we had World War II. And once we went into a war-based economy, then our economy turned around. Rather than helping, it has slowed it down and prevented it from accelerating. What is necessary is for our government to get out of the way and let our entrepreneurs invest and have confidence in our economy and knowing what's coming next. There's been so many changes. There's been so many new rules put into place that they're afraid because they do not know what's coming next. Whether it's the health care bill, whether it's new taxes, they're afraid. You are absolutely right. There's lots of capital sitting on the sideline that's not being invested. And the people are afraid to invest it. We have to get involved in a situation where they have the courage to do so. And that is, frankly, get out of the way and let the free market work. That does not mean that we do not regulate. I had a nice conversation with the lady here in the front row, and we were talking about some of the issues with banking. And part of the issues with banking is we fail to properly regulate for fiscal responsibility for those who are going out and obtaining home loans, and that crashed down on all of us. The fault is in many, many, many places. The fault is the corporations, the fault is the government, and the fault is the people that took on loans that they couldn't pay. But that does get back to the fact that we failed to behave responsibly. So I think one of the issues that we have to look at as a people, we have to be focused less on what our privileges are and more on what our responsibilities are. And if we think in those terms, we can solve our problems. Thank you. Well, it looks like I'm number 2. What can be done to improve the economy? Well, I think we just talked about it a little bit. Anybody here small businessmen? Anybody here in their own businesses? Or started a new business recently? I've talked to people in our own community. There's a shop that sells pizza that opened up, the corner pizza shop on Eagle Rock Boulevard. Colorado Boulevard. It's a small business. And these are people who had experience in construction, and they had an idea and a dream. It took them 1 year to go through the permit process in order to open that business. That means during that time they had to rent that property. They had to make payments on that property, and they had a cash outflow before they could turn around and get going. We absolutely need to find a more efficient way to deal with these kinds of issues. I'm thinking even one-stop shopping, where we can have one place a businessman can go and he can deal with all the bureaucracies that they have to deal with and be able to get going in a much more clean and efficient manner. One of our biggest problems is the loss of manufacturing. And that might even be tied into what I think ultimately might end up being green energy. We have to find ways where we can have cheap, clean, renewable energy that will be at a low enough cost where people feel free to reinvest in our economy and build new manufacturing plants. It's to make it easier, reduce the regulation, even reduce their taxes. And when we're reducing taxes, I think we're far better off, rather than trying to pick winners and losers, to reduce them across the board so we all have those benefits. Thank you.